I always thought that marriage was a constant, something I could rely on, a promise I had made and that we would both honor. But somewhere along the way, things changed. Maybe it was the exhaustion of raising 2 kids, the stress of my career, or just the erosion of time. But it wasn't like it used to be. David and I met in college. I was shy, bookish, and he was outgoing, the life of the party. We clicked immediately. We fell in love, got married, had children, and I always imagined our love story would be perfect and uninterrupted. But over the years, things became routine. There was no more passion, just schedules, responsibilities, and the demands of everyday life. Slowly, I felt a growing distance between us. The love I once felt for David still existed, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't the spark that kept me up at night. The arguments started, and I began to realize how bad things had gotten. The smallest things set us off. Forgotten chores, missed school pickups, unreturned texts. The tension was thick. There were days we didn't speak, and nights we argued until we were both exhausted. I didn't want to give up, but I didn't know how to fix what was broken. That's when David suggested marriage counseling. At first, I was hesitant. The idea of therapy felt like admitting failure, but our marriage was already falling apart. So, I agreed. The first session was awkward. David jumped in, listing his frustrations. The house wasn't clean enough. I was too busy with work, and we had no time for each other. I knew all this, but hearing it made it more real. When it was my turn, I admitted that I loved him, but the passion had disappeared. Dr. Simmons encouraged me to explore my feelings, but as I spoke, my mind wandered. I thought about someone else. Sarah. I met Sarah years ago at work. We clicked right away. She was smart, funny, and effortlessly confident. We became best friends, turning to each other for advice and comfort. I hadn't realized how much I relied on Sarah until that moment in therapy. As I reflected, I realized I didn't just love her as a friend. I was attracted to her. The realization terrified me. I wasn't sure how to process it, especially in the context of my marriage. I couldn't focus on David as he continued speaking. My mind kept drifting back to Sarah. The warmth I felt when she was around, the way she made me feel alive, seen, and appreciated. It was a pull I couldn't deny. As the session ended, Dr. Simmons suggested we take a break. I nodded, still reeling from my revelation. That night, I couldn't sleep. My thoughts were consumed by Sarah. I loved David, but I had fallen in love with someone else. I wasn't sure what to do. How could I tell David? Would he understand? Would he hate me? The next morning, David was up early making coffee. His movements were tired, and I could feel the distance between us. He asked if everything was okay, and I lied, saying I was just tired, but I knew it wasn't just that. I felt lost. I had fallen out of love with David, and my heart was elsewhere. Days passed, and I found myself thinking about Sarah more and more. Her texts, her calls. They meant something different now. Every time we talked, I felt a spark. Every time we met, I couldn't deny the pull. We had always been close, but now it was different. I was falling in love with her. It wasn't just about seeking comfort anymore. It was deeper than that. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't pretend everything was okay with David. My marriage had become a routine, and my heart was no longer in it. Sarah made me feel things I hadn't felt in years. I couldn't figure out what I wanted, but I knew I couldn't keep living a lie. One evening, I texted Sarah, "Can we talk? I need you." Before I could second-guess myself, she responded, "Of course, anytime." The next day, we met for coffee. I needed to clear my head, but I knew this meeting would change everything. As I sat across from Sarah, everything felt charged. Our usual conversations were laced with unspoken tension. She asked if something was wrong, and I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't. Instead, I said I was figuring things out. She reached across the table, taking my hand in hers. The gesture sent a shock through my body. I had been craving this touch, and now it was happening. I wasn't sure where it would lead, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. That night, as I lay next to David, I realized I had two choices: continue pretending that everything was fine, or face the truth. I didn't know what I wanted, but I knew I couldn't go back to how things were. The following days were filled with confusion. Every time I saw David, I couldn't shake the feeling that my heart was elsewhere. Sarah's presence lingered in my mind, and I couldn't deny that I was in love with her. But I didn't know how to tell David. It was late one evening when David finally confronted me. He noticed the distance between us, the way I had been withdrawn. "Lena, we need to talk," he said. My heart raced. I knew what was coming. I couldn't lie anymore. David asked what was going on. "I'm fine," I lied. But he wasn't convinced. He pressed me, and I couldn't hide it any longer. "I don't know how to explain this," I whispered, "but I feel lost. I don't know who I am anymore." David's face softened, but there was concern in his eyes. "We can work through this. Whatever it is, we'll figure it out together. But I didn't think we could. I think I've fallen in love with someone else, I said. The words felt like a knife through me. David's face drained of color. He looked at me, confused, hurt. Who? He asked. I couldn't bring myself to say Sarah's name. The truth was too painful. I don't know what to say, I stammered. It's not about you, it's about me. David took a step back. So, what does that mean? Are you leaving me for her? The question stung, but I couldn't lie anymore. I don't know. I don't know what any of this means, but I have to figure it out. David shook his head, disbelief in his eyes. After everything you're telling me this? That you're in love with someone else? What about the kids? What about us? I don't have all the answers, I whispered. I need time. I need space. David turned and walked away, leaving me in the kitchen, the weight of my confession heavy in the air. I had opened the door to a truth I could never close. I didn't know where it would lead, but I knew my life was slipping away. There was no turning back now.